Betsy and Thomas here for the American Intelligence Media. Thomas, today I have 3 topics that I want to discuss with you. Listeners, these are the 3 topics. And of course, as you know, Thomas will have an opportunity to go as far as he wants out on the path to discuss other things. But I'm going to try to keep him focused on these 3 items. The first item is an article. It's called Bitcoin Becomes Part of North Korea's Geopolitical Arsenal. I want to talk about what's going on with Bitcoin with a company named FireEye, and just talk about that article and help readers understand how you use discernment in reading some of this material that you find on the internet. The next thing we're going to talk about is Russia and the U.S. are building a moon base. And oh my goodness, Thomas was quite lively yesterday when he was reading this article and giving his opinion about the moon base. So can't wait to hear that, Thomas. And then finally, we're going to look at a man named Miles Kwok, a Chinese, and the article is entitled, Why is the DOJ Blocking the Extradition of Clinton Soros Money Man? Okay, Thomas, does that sound great?
Oh, it's always great, Betsy, especially that article that you posted, and because it was such a conundrum. And when you...
Now, let me say, before we get started, I have that link posted right under our YouTube. So if you, listeners, if you haven't read it yet and you want to read it first before you hear Thomas's comments. Okay, now, sorry.
Yes, as a matter of fact, Betsy, you had said people should read it and do their homework and get their questions together, and then you're going to ask me about it. Well, I had the good fortune of seeing the question last night and did a little research. Talked with some conclave members this morning, and I do have a response for you. So make sure that I answer each of those questions in its proper order. So
all right.
What is the first question?
Okay. First, let me just give a little thing about it. This is an article about North Korea using Bitcoin in perhaps nefarious ways, but maybe not, because they also talk about North Korea having trillions of dollars of rare earth minerals. And then they have a company name called FireEye, which raised my concern. And at the end, they make this crazy statement about Bitcoin, whereas you don't know if the article is pro or anti-Bitcoin. So you really need to read the article. All right, the first question I have on that is, where have you seen the name FireEye?
Okay, first, let me make a general remark about that article.
Oh, okay.
That article, and then make sure we address FireEye. The article is very bizarre because in the article they admit some crazy things. And you were so right to bring it to our attention to say, what is this about? Why would anyone be saying that North Korea is going to be able to get around the sanctions by using Bitcoin? Okay, let's just take that apart for a second. First off, recently, last week, supposedly, North Korea attacked South Korea Bitcoin and cryptocurrency exchanges. Okay? That didn't happen, folks. That was China. Okay? Every time that we have North Korea attributes left over one of these major hacks, those are simply attributes that are left as a false trail. Anyone would be able to figure that out. Why would North Korea, at this point, be concerned about stopping Bitcoin exchanges, especially if this article is insinuating that they're going to use Bitcoin as a way to get around the sanctions? Now, first off, there are no exchanges in North Korea. So even if they bought millions of dollars worth of Bitcoin, they would have to go into China, or not China has now forbidden it, but for a while China had exchanges. They'd have to go somewhere to an exchange outside of their country to cash them. And who would cash that, by the way? What country would cash that knowing that the sanctions are on them? So you have to ask the question, why in the world and who in the world would say, ooh, look at the way that Bitcoin can get around the government. Look at the way Bitcoin can get around sanctions. Ooh, look how beautifully, almost criminal we can use Bitcoin so that we can cheat.
Yeah, because see, when I read that, I was like, okay, are they pro or anti-Bitcoin? Because on one hand, you're saying that here is North Korea involved in nefarious activities, and they're using Bitcoin. Ooh, we should ban Bitcoin. But then on the other hand, the article says, but see how it can get around government and it can do its own thing, and it's so decentralized and so solid. So then you go, pro-Bitcoin.
So let's go on with the concept. Absolutely right, Betsy. Let's go on with the concept of who And why? Well, deeper into the article, you get the strangest confession that I have seen for quite some time. I mean, I know about these things, but unless you know Cliff High, you don't know about linguistic analysis of every word that is used on the internet, Google, Facebook, Yahoo, all of them. They can analyze them. They can go in and they can do searches, and they can simply say, what are the most common words being used on the internet? Then they analyze them with an algorithm to see if in fact they are novel, if they're pointing towards something in the future. So literally they're able to predict the future. And if you listen to Cliff High, it's pretty darn amazing. They're able to predict the future by the words being used on the internet. Now, first off, my ranting and raving about the internet being totally ran by the government, this is proof of it. How can, first off, a company, which is mentioned in this article called
FireEye.
Well, FireEye also, but the company that they refer to that is doing the futuristic planning
that's Recorded Future.
Is called Recorded Future. Recorded Future is owned by Google Venture, In-Q-Tel, and by the way, In-Q-Tel is the DARPA for NSA CIA. It's the Advanced Research Development Project for the most wicked of all cyber warfare people, NSA CIA. So this is literally a company that goes in and does queries or data mining, but specifically queries to target and attack and analyze, but specifically data mining for analysis. Well, this is the same thing that the Global Engagement Center does. These are counterintelligence cyber warfare going on. Now, they admitted in this article that Recorded Future knew this by the analysis. Okay, first off, there's hardly any internet whatsoever in North Korea. And so somehow they're able to analyze the small amount. And by the way, if we wanted to, we could turn off the internet to North Korea. So it is complete nonsense. We only allow it to go into countries that are our enemies so that we can do to them what we do to all people who go on the internet. Analyze them and treat them as terrorists, put them in an information box that limits them so that they have no freedom, and feed them false information and propaganda. So this group, Recorded Futures, listen to that phrase, Recorded Futures. In other words, they recorded the words on the internet, on all aspects of the internet. And if you think for 1 second that the dark net isn't being analyzed for every word, you're wrong, or your phone isn't being analyzed, you're wrong. Look at Vault 7, which the whistleblowing and release of Vault 7 information that shows what the NSA is actually up to.
Well, you know, when I read that, and I read here, the statement says, Recorded Future, an intelligence research firm backed by Google Venture and In-Q-Tel, a venture capital firm funded by the CIA. I had to think, wait a minute. The reporter who's writing this doesn't understand that people out here now really know what's behind Google Venture and In-Q-Tel. The reporter's simply reporting something that he found, but the rest of us out here realize the depth of what is being said in that one little statement.
Well, Betsy, you're right. It's like it was an accident. It was like they started their message before they put on their encryption system, and they let many things out of the bag in this one article. What they have let out is, first off, when you say In-Q-Tel, you say CIA.
Right.
But it's run, of course, the gear is NSA gear, but it's the CIA that directs all of our counterintelligence and most of our wicked spying, which, as I say, they're spying on everyone. So they reveal their sources, and their sources are the CIA. Oh, let's see, the CIA is doing analysis. This article is basically admitting the CIA does analysis and that they're analyzing North Korea and that they're very concerned about cryptocurrency, particularly, no, not cryptocurrency. They only mention one, and they mention Bitcoin, and they say, oh, Bitcoin. Maduro is a Bitcoin that is completely secret. That's what they would use if they were going to do that, to get around sanctions, not Bitcoin. What that basically just did was it said to China, who is the real attacker of South Korea's centers where they sell Bitcoin and other cryptocurrencies, the exchanges, So those attacks were from China. Every single time that I have ever known of a private corporation coming in, like Recorded Futures or like FireEye or Mandiant or CrowdStrike, any time they ever come in, it's fake. They're being used by the CIA. So this was an advertisement for Bitcoin, and it stuck it in the face of China because they know that it was China, not North Korea, who attacked the cryptocurrency exchanges. Of course they know that. This has been demonstrated again and again. When they use corporate intelligence, they get false information because the CIA is working with corporate intelligence, and particularly, we'll talk about that in a minute, but they use them as sock puppets, as frontmen, as shills, to basically deliver their message. And their message here was, go buy Bitcoin. It can get around even sanctions.
Right. So then, as I was reading the article, another name just like popped out and hit me, and that was the name of the company, FireEye. And I went, wait, I've seen that name before, and it struck me the same way the first time I saw that word CrowdStrike, just knowing that there was something behind it that we needed to explore. So, of course, FireEye is mentioned in the Equifax hacking. Can you explain if there's a relationship now between these two and these two different articles?
Well, yes.
Did I say Firefox? I meant FireEye.
No, you said FireEye.
Okay.
And I'm going to explain that, but it goes a little bit off track of what we're saying in that the reference to FireEye in the article is just a very quick reference. But FireEye was, of course, has bought in 2013 a company called Mandiant. And Mandiant's run by Kevin Mandia, an ex-Air Force intelligence officer. Now, FireEye is run by a Pakistani national, okay, just like Imran Awan, a Pakistani national. This company is ran by one person. FireEye bought Mandiant, but when they bought Mandiant recently they took Kevin Mandiant and replaced the guy who founded FireEye, whose name is Ashir Aziz, as I say, a Pakistani national. Now, let me explain what happens. Just like CrowdStrike, all of these men, all three of them, worked for John McAfee. They all worked at McAfee Virus Protection.
You're kidding, but John McAfee has just come out. He's like so pro-Bitcoin.
Because he's CIA.
Okay.
Because we have said now,
yes,
and we have confirmation that there is no Nakamoto, Satoshi Nakamoto is completely fake. So one day, out of the clear blue, this Japanese guy takes what is known as, well, we can go into Bitcoin because now I've been studying it a bit and I understand because I'm a programmer. I finally found the truth of Bitcoin and what Bitcoin really is. It's an encryption system that has been used for a long time. It's called a Merkle tree. And a Merkle tree is called also a hash tree. And all it is blocks that can be looked at from all directions by everyone participating as a verification system. It's really no big deal. But then when they applied it to decentralized dispersed ledger, or it's a ledger system that's decentralized. There's a name for it, dispersed ledger system or something like that. But the point is that everyone who's involved in it gets to participate. So when the people started off with $1 to buy a Bitcoin, and a young man got involved who has now been the face of Bitcoin and now has actually left Bitcoin completely, we don't know who owns the biggest chunks of Bitcoin. So whoever bought Bitcoin to begin with for $1 a piece is now filthy rich. Well, we have just heard in this article fairly convincing circumstantial evidence that the CIA is promoting Bitcoin with big fat lies that anybody who knows anything about cybersecurity knows that North Korea did not attack South Korea. And North Korea did not attack America. This is complete nonsense. They do not have the capacity. Those are footprints left by companies like CrowdStrike. CrowdStrike came into the DNC and left the Russian footprints, came back 6 months later and said that they had been hacked. But the 6 months before, when they came in and said that they found that the Russians had in fact hacked, there was no hack, there was a breach. They put on their own proprietary system. Most of us have McAfee's system on our computer for, he's one of the largest virus protection systems. Those systems go in and they protect you. CrowdStrike has their own called Falcon. Mandiant had their own called IOC. FireEye has their own. Each of these companies worked with McAfee. Now, McAfee to begin with wasn't McAfee. It was a company involving all these people. And it was an In-Q-Tel incubation project. All of them. Go back and look up any of their histories. You will find that they are all military started by military people who worked with spies. Spies from Russia, spies from Pakistan, spies from Israel. They're all spies. There's always a military guy who is, I consider to be an anti-American, anti-patriot, treasonous person who should be put in jail, who takes what we know as our code, what we have as our code, which is, by the way, controlled by a Russian named Michael Alperovitch, Dmitry Alperovich's father. Our military encryption codes were shared with McAfee, with Mandia, with Aziz when he worked for Sun Microsoft. They all get together. They're given like a DARPA project, but an In-Q-Tel project. They develop it a little bit, and then it's always Goldman Sachs or some huge venture capital company like Google Venture comes in, backs them up, gives them huge amounts of money. For instance, Mandia they're doing, $100 million worth of business. Oh, but when FireEye bought them, they bought them for $1 billion. Now FireEye is being sold. I don't know how much for, but it will be a huge amount of money. When we're talking about these companies, they're very, very small companies, but they're worth billions and billions of dollars. So they're now saying that Mandiant's valuation by Goldman Sachs was false and it wasn't worth what FireEye paid for it. Now FireEye is, of course, going to ask billions and billions of dollars because they have the contract. Mandiant has the contract for 200 of the 500 Fortune 500 companies. In other words, Mandiant has the ability to spy on every single aspect of those 200 Fortune 500 companies. And they work directly with In-Q-Tel, the CIA. So just like Equifax gave information to the government to be added to a branch of the military that nobody knows is a branch of the military called Alphabet, the mother company, supposed alleged mother company of Google, they are collecting all this information because the information it's supposedly hacked. It's not hacked, it's breached. It's actually stolen by the people on the inside, by the very companies that are hired to come in to look at them. By Equifax, by Mandiant, by FireEye, by numerous other ones. Every single one of these companies is the same. They have one person usually at the top, and that person is considered a genius. No, they're not a genius at all. John McAfee is not a genius at all. John McAfee says that Bitcoin will go to 500,000 very soon. From $1 a few years ago to $500,000. And he's made an open bet, and he's told the world, and I won't quote the bet because it's grotesque, but he says that it absolutely will go. Why does he say that? John McAfee, listen to any of the interviews with John McAfee. He will tell you that McAfee virus protection doesn't help you at all. There's no such thing as a secure communication anywhere ever. The military has the back door. They've always had the back door through Cisco routers, through Microsoft's own microprocessors. They've always had, Vault 7 proves this. Vault 7 proves that NSA, not NASA, the National Security Agency, and all of its branches in the military, because every branch of the military has a branch of the NSA in it, they set this stuff out to be used against people, and they're gathering the information so that they can profile everyone, so they can control everyone, and for consumer purposes, but also for security purposes. So these companies are fake. All they do is like John McAfee does. John McAfee comes in, he puts his virus protection on because he knows the base code that was released to him and all the other top people. All of the top people have worked through McAfee. They all came through McAfee, and all the criminals have all come through McAfee. McAfee's a criminal. He has to be a criminal. He's just like Zuckerberg. Zuckerberg works for the CIA. Anyone who thinks otherwise is stupid. NSA admitted that they control everything in Facebook. Facebook admitted that you sign a contract allowing all your information to be analyzed. This is known because of the article you just posted, Betsy. It says point blank that Recorded Futures goes in and does this. They go in and analyze everything on Facebook, Google, Yahoo, anything Googled, anything on the internet. Now, what they didn't have was your personal credit information, and they wanted to force everyone to go into a credit freeze by freezing their credit right now so that it would help the crash, because they can't get the crash going the way they want, in my opinion. It will come. They will control it, but they have to get their mechanisms in place. Stealing all the credit information from Equifax of every single adult American is now in the hands of Alphabet and the NSA and CIA. Remember, I always have to report this to you. CIA, NSA are in a war. FBI, they're all fighting each other because they all work for the military-industrial complex through private contractors. Those private contractors have only one thing in interest, and that's their bottom line of greed, their corporate take. What are they going to get? What's their net assessment? What do they get out of this? They're not working for America. They're working for international interests, transnational interests, and these corporations, every one of them. I don't know a single private intelligence corporation that is not crooked, that has not. For instance, where's the largest one? Who did Mandiant work for after McAfee? Lockheed Martin. Lockheed Martin has stole trillions of dollars from us, folks. This is a known fact. Well known. Catherine Austin Fitts, if you don't know about this, listen to her. She'll tell you all about it. But the point is, all these companies have insiders who get the information, go outside, and then give that information to the outside. So McAfee, Mandiant, CrowdStrike, FireEye all have their own proprietary security system. The second that it is on your system, for instance, when CrowdStrike put Falcon on the DNC, it was only after that these breaches actually became big, and it didn't stop any of the breaches, and it didn't stop any of the hacking. When Mandiant went in and helped Equifax, it didn't help Equifax. They knew they weren't even following their own security protocols. It was a plan. And then they made up this idea that Mandiant went in and put their proprietary security system on, which then watched as Equifax was bled dry of all the information of every single adult America's credit history. Are you kidding? These are setups. This is very clearly the CIA working with the NSA, working with ex-intelligence people, and basically stealing everything that they possibly can, and then attribute it and putting in the footprints of China, of Russia, of North Korea, seldom Pakistan, but occasionally Pakistan and other countries.
Okay, well, that was great, because that shows that sometimes when you're reading some of these articles, your head will turn inside out and trying to figure out what are they saying. Do you have anything else to say about that one, Thomas?
Well, of course, Betsy, I have lots more to say about that, because this is my area. It's a joke. It is a joke to think that anyone is secure, a corporation or not. When they're talking about China and stealing intellectual property, let's remember what I have been saying now in numerous audios, numerous videos, as we call them. China was hacking us like crazy, but they really didn't need to, because they were basically building everything for us. So through simply reverse engineering, they were getting all of our intellectual property, but they were being blamed for hacking us over and over and over and over again. So as I told you, Silicon Valley simply called a meeting with China. They came to Silicon Valley, not to Washington, D.C., and they agreed not to hack any more corporations, but that they were going to absolutely continue to hack the U.S. government. Does that sound logical to anyone? Does that sound feasible, viable? That is not possible. When the U.S. government is hacked, like the Office of Personnel Management, as I said, I think yesterday or the day before, that wasn't China. That wasn't attributed. You can't attribute it to the footprints that were left. A high school student, literally, if you read the article down at the bottom of most of these articles, they'll say China hacked us, Korea hacked us, Russia hacked us, and down at the bottom it should say, or it could have been anyone with a computer.
Okay, that's it. We're moving on to the next topic. All right, now, folks, hang on, because this is one of Thomas's favorite subjects. I posted an article that Russia and the U.S. are building a moon base, and you went nuts. And of course, I know why you went nuts. It's all about how we're going to get there, right?
Well, Betsy, until recently, anyone who said we didn't go to the moon, even though they saw the proof from the films, and there have been just endless hours of proof that all the films are fake, plus all the original films are gone. Don't forget
they
that.
lost them.
Oh, they lost them, just like, everything that has ever been sealed for years in American history is gone when they open the seal, right?
Oh, and they even lost the instructions on how they got to the moon.
That's where I was going with this.
And folks, we saw the videos. We watched them. They were authentic.
It is just... Which videos?
The one that the guy, he's the engineer, and he's talking about something else,
Oh,
and they ask him why. So can we go back to the moon? And he said, "Well, we've lost those papers. We don't
Yes.
know how to do it."
You see, when you give the military and the military secrets to the corporations, there's a lot of confusion. So here we have on multiple videos. This is just hysterical. Plus, you'll see all the spin videos and caricatures that have just recently been put out to antidote this. You see, when you really see a huge mistake on YouTube and it's the government and they let loose a secret, within a week or less, you will see other videos come out that 100% prove why we can get through the Van Allen belts. 100% prove why the temperatures in the thermosphere, which get to 6,000 degrees Fahrenheit, which melts all metal on the Earth, how we got through that. You're going to see video after video. You're going to see NASA come out and explain it. But here's what happened. We were watching a video about the new sellout of America to Elon Musk, who basically is simply being subsidized by the United States. We are losing more money with supposedly corporate interests going into space than we ever lost with our own space program, because we are paying those people to do it. Now, they just sent their Orion capsule, Elon Musk, to 1,300 miles off the surface of the Earth. Okay? And so they had multiple interviews about this. And they're doing it for their Mars program because they say by 2026 or something, we're going to be on Mars. We'll also have a space station like the space station around Earth, around the moon, but that will be with Russia. But we're going to let Elon Musk, a corporate guy who's selling every secret that he discovers, which he got from us, to everyone else in the world. And that's the reason China and Russia are saying they're going there, because if we say we're going there, you can bet that Elon Musk has taken those secrets and sold them to China and Russia. That's the way it goes. But they don't have the secrets. Here's what they say. Two NASA experienced astronauts who were part of the Orion program going to the moon with a very complicated video says that they can't yet. Yeah. That their recent experiment that brought the re-entry vehicle to a temperature of 5,000 degrees Fahrenheit was a success, but it was also a failure because they found that certain things that they were attempting to use to shield from that heat didn't work. And so they say the following: we want to go to Mars, but we have to work out a few things first. One of the things we have to work out is getting through the Van Allen belts, which will basically kill any astronaut who's in it for any period of time, especially if there's a coronal mass ejection or solar flare like there has been recently.
No. They've got these great new uniforms now. I saw them, and they're really looking fancy. And you wonder, when you sit back, first of all, it's just really sad that we all have to realize that our government has been lying to us so egregiously for so many years. As little children, we all sat in front of the TV set believing that we went to the moon. And goodness, it wasn't until a few years ago that I woke up and realized that it was just impossible. It was just a Hollywood production, and a poor one at that. I guess they didn't realize that the technology would get away with them and everyday people would be able to see through the falsity of their filmmaking. But anyway,
Stanley Kubrick was hired in Britain to create on a stage outside of London those shots on the moon and stuff. Plus, they take shots of them underwater. And there's a lot of lying. Now, I'm not saying, because I don't want people to put a tinfoil hat upon my head, I'm not saying we didn't go to the moon. I am saying that we have devices. We have ships that can fly into space without any rockets. We've had that since 1950, called the SR-71, which has plasma engines which can fly into space. You have to wear a spacesuit. We never needed to launch rockets. We can fly into space. That is not a problem. We've always been able to fly into space from the moment, long before
but
we...
define space, Thomas. How far out is space?
we can go. Okay. The
And
SR.
when you say we, are you talking about human beings on that ship?
The United States of America, SR-71, flies into the mesosphere. They don't like to fly into the thermosphere because it can have surges in the daytime of temperatures that reach 6,000 Fahrenheit. Now you will hear, because this has been pointed out, because these mistakes have been made. I'm going back to what the NASA astronaut said in a second, but they will tell you from NASA, they're now putting out film after film after film on YouTube, that when you're in this exosphere, the thermosphere, excuse me, and then go into the exosphere, in the thermosphere, it every day gets to be 3,000 degrees in the daylight, and the exosphere, as you exit the Earth, you have to go through a band that is 6,000 degrees Fahrenheit. So they will tell you that if you were there and you were standing there, it'll just feel a little bit warm because there's just not enough molecules and atoms around to get all stirred up to create the heat. In other words, they're so stupid they think that we're stupid enough to believe that the warmth that comes to us through those atmospheres, those layers of our atmosphere that heat the Earth, that there's no such thing as radiant heat. If you put an object into that thermosphere, it will heat to that temperature. And we are led to believe that the lunar landing module in some places was only protected by aluminum, which melts at 1,200 degrees Fahrenheit. So all I'm saying is the following: that the Orion project and the astronauts coming out and doing their PR said, we have yet to work out the problems of getting through the Van Allen belts without people being irradiated to death, once we go through the higher levels of the thermosphere and the exosphere. We also haven't figured out how to create substances, and now they say they have new substances made out of ceramic and out of glass and out of what's this? Another substance where they mix those together, and they created the shield that they used for the reentry of the Orion reentry capsule, which they say only was burnt up a bit. And so they're going to develop new things so that it won't burn up. Well, then how? So then the cosmonaut, the astronaut, says the following. You would probably ask the question, why is it that we have to somewhat rediscover the things that we need to get through the Van Allen belts and to have the ability to handle the temperatures of our atmosphere? Well, what really happened was we went to the moon and then we lost the papers that told us how to get there. Those were the words. These were talking points,
I was
obviously.
there. I heard it.
We lost the papers that tell us how to get through the Van Allen belts and to get through the heat. We lost the papers. I just have to keep repeating that. Just like they lost the original films that Stanley Kubrick made.
But that sets them up for losing emails and losing all the documents if they lose.
By the way, when the first step landed on the moon, how could there have been a camera on the outside taking a picture of it?
Hey, listen, we can go through all those
on and on and on. So
That's
we're
right.
not saying that we didn't go to the moon, because there are all kinds of crafts that I have witnessed and that I have. I
am saying a human being did not land on the moon.
Well, when you
and
ask,
come back safely.
Here's the question that people will say. Well, then if that's the case, show me a picture of a telescope that can show the remnants of the lunar landing module. And so they show, this is really, they don't have any of those. But recently, in 2009, supposedly, they sent a rocket into space that had two satellites that circled the moon and took pictures of all of the sites of where we landed on the moon. And you can look at them, folks. Go online and say pictures of the lunar landing. And they're going to show you some pictures where there is not one single item on there, not one single thing that is actually identifiable. And this is from high resolution, incredibly high resolution cameras. I worked with those cameras back in 1972 when we had the ability to take a picture in space of a Russian tank and take the serial number off of a bolt on that tank. And you're telling me that they can't give us a good picture of the remains of the lunar landing module. You'll just see these little things where they show an arrow and they point at something and you can see it's nothing.
Well, what was the item that they did say was left on the moon, but oops, we can't see it because it's left on the dark side of the moon?
Oh, well, that's these 2 satellites that they sent, and they supposedly mapped out all of the gravity of the moon. Now, that's interesting, seeing that we only discovered gravity waves recently. But they say these 2 things, these 2 satellites. Now, you'll remember a number of years ago, there was a big talk about we're going to drop a nuclear bomb on the moon.
Oh, yeah, I remember
and we
that.
did.
Yeah.
Supposedly, we crashed 2 nuclear-powered satellites, the 2 satellites I'm talking about, which took these only pictures there are, which obviously have been doctored if you even look at them. The only one picture that looks like there's something in it has so obviously been doctored, it's disturbing. So they crashed these 2 satellites into the North Pole of the moon, on the dark side of the North Pole of the moon, so that we couldn't see them hit. So there are no pictures of this. Though, in fact, we love pictures of crashing satellites into things, but supposedly there were a couple pictures of one satellite and then the second satellite as it followed the first satellite, which, by the way, no one ever said there was a second satellite during the time they admitted this to the news. There was never a single word. Now they say there were 2 satellites. There was never a word about 2 satellites. There was 1. There was never a word that those satellites were mapping the gravitational fields on the moon, which is a joke, seeing that there's so little gravity in the moon, and we only recently realized that there are gravity waves. How in the world could they have mapped them back in 2009 and then crashed these 2 satellites into the dark side of the moon so no one could see them? Okay, well, that's what I had to say about that.
All right.
Wait, one other thing. The space lab, where is it? It's in the lower atmosphere. It isn't in the high atmosphere. And here's what they say. I love this. I can't even believe this. I'm beginning to wonder if there is a space satellite, if there is a
Space station?
Space station.
Oh, listen, I've doubted that for years. I just think it's a big hole to suck money in.
I always thought there was, but now, oh my gosh, I see film after film after film on YouTube which demonstrates that it is fake. Now, here's what they recently said. Because, as I say, there have been dozens. I mean, NASA pretty much closed up shop. But now they're producing films saying that they're just as active as ever and they're going to go to the moon? What are they talking about? We've given our entire program over to corporations. We don't even NASA doesn't even exist anymore.
But it's a great way to suck taxpayer money into these nefarious activities that they're doing.
So I love this. As a matter of fact, most of the missiles that are launched by corporations now. They are not launched by NASA. But anyway, so what do they say in the space station? I love this one. Well, yes, the recent coronal mass ejections, which were some of the largest ever seen. In the last few years, we've had an unprecedented amount of coronal mass ejections, completely stripping off huge sections of the sun, and some of them have come directly at the Earth. And now, recently, within the last few weeks, last month, we have had 2 of the largest solar flares and 2 of the largest coronal mass ejections connected. And so what do they say? This is beautiful. They say the cosmonauts, the astronauts in the space station simply go to a part of the space station that has lead shielding.
That's funny, but
Cosmic rays in lead, folks, increases the potency of cosmic radiation. If they went into a lead-lined capsule during a cosmic radiation emission for the sun, they would be dead. So there's no such thing as going into a shielded section. So I have to question now, because we haven't had a coronal mass ejection and a solar flare at the same time pointed at the Earth. We just had 2. We just had some of the largest northern lights, southern lights that we've ever seen in history. Some of the largest flares in our magnetosphere. Some of the largest magnetic transfer flux points. And they're going to tell us that the astronauts just went into a protected part. Well, then why don't they protect the whole thing?
Well, listen, we had one viewer say, hey, look, you guys need to do stream of consciousness because they really enjoy what we talk about. And it's that way all the time here, folks. We're always just touching on some crazy ideas. And one Thomas said the other day that I thought was so funny because we were reading that the Chinese want to go to the moon. And of course, joke's on them, right? Because we never got there. At least that's what I'm saying, Thomas. We never got there. And then Thomas said, yeah, well, maybe that's why they want to buy Hollywood, because they figured out that it was a movie production. So anyway, okay, well, we have way too good of a time here now. And when we laugh, folks, we're not laughing at the people that might be harmed by the stuff that's going on. We laugh just to give us a little relief because we're finding out the real truth along with you. And we're just getting rid of this lie so we can start living in a world of truth and wisdom.
The lies are coming unraveled in the clothes that the emperor is wearing, and now they're naked, and we're laughing because the evil is showing itself in its last ditch attempts to try to hide itself.
Right. And also humor does it brings some sanity to it. When Trump tweets out about Kim Jong-un that he is first he's a rocket man, and then he's a little rocket man. I mean, everybody here knows what he's really trying to do. He's giving a man a diminution that's probably seen by many to be a diminution of his masculinity. So it's a little humor, but it takes down the cabal in ways that they never dreamt that a politician would do. Okay, so now let's go on to the next one. I want to know about this Miles Kwok. Now, this article is entitled, Why is the DOJ blocking the extradition of Clinton Soros money man? And then as the article goes on, you realize that there are Chinese businessmen here in the United States that the DOJ seems to be protecting. And they also seem to be related to this Clinton machination. So what did you make out of that article, Thomas?
Well, that's a very interesting article, Betsy, because it underscores what we've been saying. First off, let's point out, they called him a George Soros bagman, a money man, right? Well, yeah. George Soros and Henry Kissinger might as well be married. They're in the same exact bed. They sleep together every night. They are jumping up and down about China, aren't they? And so what we see is Kissinger saying, China is the new dominant force in the world. America is past. Give up on America. America needs to become a vassal of China. That is why Bannon has joined together with Kissinger to create an alarm warning system of the power of China. But you see, Bannon took what Kissinger said and went one step further. Kissinger wants to kiss the feet of these totalitarians because he's a totalitarian. Bannon hates totalitarianism and he wants to destroy it, but he also wants to destroy the totalitarianism in our own institutions in Washington, D.C. So different approaches. Now, why George Soros? Okay, first off, there's multiple billionaires living in the same exact building in New York, the expensive place, high-rise in New York. George Soros lives there. So do multiple Chinese billionaires. How did they become billionaires? Because George Soros helped them. They have markets. They are not free markets. They are betting on state-owned institutions. It is stupid to think that the Chinese markets are in any way capitalistic markets. They are totalitarian attempts at capitalism. Now, I've said this before, and people don't want to hear what I have to say, unfortunately, many times, because
who doesn't want to hear what you have to say, Thomas?
Because I say it too early. I'm like a Cassandra.
That's true.
I make predictions which come true, and people will not listen to them. I was the first person to say Paul Manafort's going down before Paul Manafort's name was ever brought up with the Russian thing.
I can remember people in the conclave saying there's no way.
I was the first person to say that the Russian hacker was Dmitry Alperovitch, and I'm going to be the first person to say that all of these security agencies, corporations, are working for the mothership, which is Alphabet. Alphabet will be the world. They will be larger and more powerful than any nation in the world within the next 10 years. They will control every person who goes onto the internet, and they will charge you for going onto the internet because Alphabet will simply buy the lines that run the internet because they're for sale, folks, because they actually don't belong to anyone. They belong to the U.S. government. So that is a prediction. Now, what is happening with these billionaires? George Soros goes in. He teaches them how to manipulate the markets. They make billions. And then recently, within the last year, and within the last 2 years, there's been even more. But within the last year, there have been 5 billionaires who made money off the stock market, who stood back and went, whoa, how did that happen? That was cool. They were killed or came up missing, never seen from again. So that's what's happening in China. If you are one of the people who are given the money by George Soros through the CIA, as I said already, if Bannon is working with Kissinger, that means that already the CIA is attempting to penetrate into China to create the same type of civil disturbances that lead to civil war, that lead to the takeover of their central bank. And this can only happen once economic terrorism goes in and destroys their markets. So the fake Chinese gold market, the Shanghai Gold Exchange we went into yesterday or the day before, completely fake, completely lies. The Hong Kong market, they allow foreigners to come in, but look very closely. It's all slanted, just like the Shanghai Gold Exchange. 17% discount for all people Chinese. Okay, this is the kind of thing going on. So when the billionaires made the money, they have to leave the country. And then they have to be protected by a George Soros, because those billionaires, if they continue to control the companies, the asset management companies and the brokerage firms, then they can, on paper, appear in the Chinese market to still own those stocks. Trust me, China owns all the stocks on the market. And if you become a billionaire and you're Chinese, you are going down one way or the other. That they haven't come and taken those guys out, that's just because China likes to do things very stealthily. That's why they annex, they co-opt, they simply gradually infiltrate, and then they take over, and that's the way that it works. So that's what they do to everyone around them. Russia knows that. Outer Mongolia knows that. Inner Mongolia knows that. Tibet knows that. Ladakh, Bhutan, all of them. Anything connecting to China, you better be careful. Taiwan, they fight right now. Taiwan says they're independent. They're not independent. They were absolutely economically annexed by China, and China says that. They keep things separate. But where do you think China got the technology to become such a massive producer in such a short period of time? Taiwan. And also, as we pointed out, that's where the nationalist gold from China went. When 1,400 tons of gold went to Taiwan, it was stolen from China. And also Japan went in and stole 6,600 tons of gold, which is well known historically, and now Japan doesn't have that gold. So if people want to question what I'm saying about gold, simply do your historical homework. Japan does not have that gold. Where did the gold go? Okay? Are you going to believe it that it's still buried in
The Philippines?
in the Philippines, in caves and holes in the Philippines? No. Allen Dulles went in and they got that gold the second they could. They went in. Let's remember that the gold in Europe also came to America. It came to Prescott Bush's bank. It was held by the Bush family. Some of the gold was held here in America. Averill Harriman. Don't get me started on this.
Don't get you started is right, because we
I
did a
forgot the
video on
topic.
that. You can just look in our playlist and see it.
Dead Chinese billionaires. There's going to be more of them.
Okay. Now, it was a surprise to me when our app developer told me that we have a huge audience in China. In fact, our audience in China is larger than our audience in the United States when it comes to the app. So here's your moment. Is there anything that you might like to tell the Chinese listeners?
Yes, beware of organizations that say they're humanitarian. Now, do I want the Chinese to still be communist and totalitarian as they attempt to become capitalist? They really have no choice. They are basically now a communist oligarchy. And the people at the top, also, let's remember that these Chinese billionaires in America, why do they say they're staying here? And why have they come? Because they have come out and they said that the corruption at the top of the Chinese totalitarian oligarchy, which is now becoming capitalistic, is horrifying. That the families are all protected. and that no one else in China, they care about no one else in China. And we know this. We know that the Central Committee of any communist country always goes bad. And so, of course, China has gone bad. But what I want to say is, I'm glad that you're following us because you have a way to get in to listen to us so that you are not being filtered. But do not think for 1 second that anyone in China is free. And they are even less free in North Korea.
Well, it's not like Americans are free either. None of us on this planet are free until we get rid of the top pyramid, corporate, corrupt kings, whatever they are. We have to get rid of them.
Well, you're right about that. But in America, we have the ability to become free in our minds and our consciousness so that we cannot be bound by these things. And for instance, in China, they don't get to choose. They don't have Google and free Google where they can Google things they want. They can't use the internet for getting free information. They are bound. Everything in China is bound. Matter of fact, I can tell you another story about China that's very funny because you see, China looks at us and they see what the CIA did. And that's why they're creating all these dummy asset management companies, because that's how the CIA has over 2,000 companies. Some of them are the biggest companies in the world. As I've said before, Blackstone and their affiliates together is larger than most of the nations in the world. So what's happening in China is the totalitarian oligarchs are setting up companies. And that's what we did in the USSR. We went in and we showed the oligarchs, the totalitarians, how to get their piece of the pie. When they started grabbing, we set up dummy companies. We set up dummy banks, Riggs Banks, Velmet Bank. We sent in Goldman Sachs to set up dummy asset management companies. We sent in George Soros to manipulate the currency, Leo Wanta to manipulate the currency, both USSR and later to Russia. We do this to any of our enemies. We're doing it now to China. I didn't know this. Thank you, Steve Bannon. I said the other day that you're getting too big for your pants because you went and you met with Yoda, Andrew Marshall, we're the only people that I know of who've ever written an article about him, an expose on him, and you went and you met with these powerful people, and so that's okay. But you know what? You don't have the power. You don't know what you're doing, Steve Bannon. China has defeated anyone who has ever attempted to come into that country. They don't go outside of the country. They don't really need to. They infiltrate simply by sending their people into other countries. Do you realize that across the southern border of America at one point there were more Chinese coming into this country, Chinese pregnant women, than there were Mexicans? Okay. Think of that. Anchor babies coming from China. Think of that. And then think of the fact of the power that China has in America.
Wow, Thomas, everything you say is so amazing. I know we could spend hours on this, but we feel like in our one-room global classroom, we should only go for an hour and make sure that those subjects are broken down so people can see by the minute mark where they're located. So they can do that right there on the YouTube. Wrap it up for us.
Well, Betsy, it's always interesting to discuss these intelligence corporations and counterintelligence corporations. Now, one thing I want to say is this. Mandiant, FireEye, CrowdStrike, all of them, all of the ones that we've listed as corporate intelligence groups, as we have pointed out, 800,000 people have top secret security clearances in this country. 65% of them are corporate officials who shouldn't, none of them, not a one of them should have a security clearance. And if you worked in the military before, like a James Clapper, and then you go out and you work for one of the largest corporate intelligence agencies, you are a treasonous non-American. So we need to stop the illusion that we hire cyber warfare protection companies. For instance, go to FireEye. On their channel, on their very website, they have up at the top a picture of the world, and they're showing, according to them, that they're monitoring the whole world, and there are attacks coming from Russia. Here's one from Russia to someplace in California. Here's one from Pakistan to someplace in New York. And they're showing you supposedly real-time attacks on America corporations, on America defenses, American military. These are lies. If they could do that, then they could stop them. look into their record. They don't stop the attacks. They usually have the contract with the very companies that have the biggest attacks. So China has agreed no longer to attack corporations. Well, hello, our military is led by intelligence corporations. So China has backed off. In the last 2 years, we have seen less and less and less. And after the Silicon Valley meeting with China, we have seen almost none. But what do we still see? Oh, we still see Mandiant coming in and saying the Equifax supposed hack, it was not a hack, it was a breach. Someone simply took that information and sold it, probably to a number of people, not only to Alphabet, to also their, to Total ID and to other affiliates and so on and so forth. But in fact, there was no attack by the North Korean. There was no attack on Equifax by the Chinese. There was no attack by Russia on us during the election. Russia couldn't care less about us. Okay, think about this, folks. Why would anybody hack anybody? To get information to use against them. So if there are the largest hacks in the world, the one that CrowdStrike supposedly discovered, 143 hacks from China, 114 hacks discovered by Kevin Mandia when he was working for McAfee, those are all lies. Okay? Because if there were hacks, where's the information they stole? Where's the leverage they used? Where are the people they damaged? So you see, what we're trying to teach you is read to the bottom of the article, read through the article, research, find out who these people are. For instance, Equifax, I'm going to tell you one other fact right here, which is going to just show exactly what I'm talking about. Mandiant hasn't existed since 2013. Okay? It was bought by FireEye. But all the reports say Mandiant was responsible for Equifax. And when they say CrowdStrike had other companies, other cyber companies come in and analyze their analysis, Mandiant, they say, was one. FireEye was one. And I can name some others, but for our purposes here. Mandiant didn't even exist at that time, folks. FireEye had already bought them. And they didn't see any data. There was no data ever given. So when Mandiant and FireEye came in and said they 100% substantiated CrowdStrike's finding, that just means that they are CIA. As soon as you find one CIA company, look who they work with. And then you're going to find another CIA affiliated, as they call it, read into
Hey, you
organization.
hear that sound, Thomas?
I think it's time to go.
That is time for you to be gone. See you the next time.